Have you ever felt that the harder you try to hold your life together, the more it slips through your fingers? Have you ever wondered why the moments that break your ego can also become the moments that heal your heart? Welcome back to the channel. Today I want to tell you a story about losing yourself. Not in a dangerous way, not in a confused way, but in the quiet spiritual sense where the false self loosens and something wiser takes its place. The world teaches you to build an identity and defend it, to be somebody, to stay in control, to be impressive, to never be wrong, to never be small. But many people secretly feel exhausted by that performance. This is why the idea of losing yourself can feel frightening, unrelieving at the same time. Here are the two truths I want you to keep close as we walk. First, the self you are afraid to lose is often a bundle of habits, fears, and stories that were built to survive, not to awaken. When you loosen that bundle, you do not disappear, you become more real. Second, losing yourself is not an accident that happens only to unlucky people. It can be a practice of seeing impermanence, understanding karma, and choosing compassion over ego. So your destiny stops being dragged around by craving and fear. Now let us begin where most people actually begin, with the pressure to be someone. You wake up and there's already a role waiting. Student, child, friend, partner, worker, achiever, problem solver, entertainer, responsible one, strong one, funny one, quiet one. The role might change depending on the room you enter, but the pressure stays. Do not fail. Do not look weak. Do not be rejected. Do not be forgotten. Do not be ordinary. That pressure becomes a kind of invisible armor. Armor has a purpose. It protects. That armor also has a cost. It prevents you from breathing freely. And this is where suffering starts. Not only because life is hard, but because you are trying to be a fixed person in a changing world. A fixed person cannot exist for long because everything changes. Bodies change, friends change, interests change, skills change, plans change, the world changes. Even the thoughts in your head change from minute to minute. So the deeper conflict is this. The mind demands stability in a universe built on impermanence. That demand creates tension. Tension creates reactivity. Reactivity plants karma. Karma becomes destiny. So when we talk about the subtle art of losing yourself, we are really talking about how to stop demanding the impossible and start living wisely inside change. Now imagine a person named Rowan. Rowan is not a villain. Rowan is a normal person living a normal modern life. Rowan wants peace and also wants success. Rowan wants connection and also wants independence. Rowan wants to be loved and also fears being seen too clearly. Rowan has dreams and also carries shame. Rowan tries hard. From the outside, Rowan looks fine. From the inside, Rowan feels like a constant manager of image. Rowan checks messages too often. Rowan replays conversations. Rowan tries to predict what people think. Rowan edits personality depending on the audience. Rowan seeks approval and then feels empty when approval arrives. Rowan distracts with screens when silence feels too loud. Rowan keeps moving because stopping would reveal the ache underneath. This is a common modern suffering. Not dramatic enough to be called a crisis, but heavy enough to slowly drain life. One day Rowan watches something about losing yourself, and at first it sounds like a strange idea. Why would I want to lose myself? I am trying to find myself. I am trying to build myself. I am trying to become stronger. But the message does not mean lose your morals or lose your direction. It means lose the false self that you keep protecting. The false self is the one made of comparison, fear, and performance. The false self is the one that believes your worth depends on outcomes and applause. The false self is the one that panics whenever you are not in control. Rowan does not fully understand it yet, but something in Rowan relaxes just hearing the possibility that the self might be lighter than it seems. Then life provides the real lesson, because life always does. A disruption arrives. It could be a breakup. It could be a friendship ending. It could be a public embarrassment. It could be a failure after years of trying. It could be a health scare. It could be a family conflict that forces truth into the open. Whatever it is, it cracks the identity. Rowan feels the crack like a shock. The mind says, "This cannot be happening." The mind says, "This ruins my plan." The mind says, "This proves I am not enough." The mind says, "I must fix it immediately." The mind says, "I must control the narrative." The mind says, "I must not feel this." This is the moment when most people either tighten the armor or break down. But Rowan remembers the phrase, "losing yourself." Rowan wonders if this might be the time to stop fighting and start learning. So Rowan tries something new, something subtle. Instead of immediately chasing distraction, Rowan sits still for a few minutes. The breath is shallow. The chest is tight. The thoughts are fast. The urge to escape is strong. Rowan wants to scroll, snack, message, argue, prove, blame, or run. Rowan does not judge the urges. Rowan just watches them. That watching is the first step of losing yourself, because the watcher is not the same as the urge. The watcher is quieter. The watcher is more spacious. The watcher does not need to win an argument to exist. The watcher does not need approval to breathe. Rowan begins to see something uncomfortable. A lot of suffering is coming from the story of self. The story says, "I should not be rejected." The story says, "I should always succeed." The story says, "I should be admired." The story says, "I should be ahead." The story says, "I should be special." But reality does not promise any of that. Reality promises change. So Rowan asks a different question. If I stop trying to be special, what remains? This question is frightening at first because identity has been used like a life raft. But then something surprising happens. When Rowan stops clinging to being special, Rowan feels more human. And when you feel more human, you feel less alone, because you realize everyone is carrying some version of this struggle. This is one of the most healing discoveries. Your private shame is often a universal fear. And when you see it as universal, compassion appears. Compassion for yourself. Compassion for others. Compassion for the people who hurt you because they are also afraid. This is how losing yourself can increase love instead of decreasing it. Now let us connect this to karma, because karma gives this whole story a backbone. Karma is not punishment. Karma is cause and effect. When Rowan clings to ego, Rowan reacts quickly. When Rowan reacts quickly, Rowan says things that create conflict. When Rowan creates conflict, relationships weaken. When relationships weaken, loneliness grows. When loneliness grows, Rowan clings harder to ego for protection. I loop. But when Rowan practices losing the false self, Rowan pauses. When Rowan pauses, Rowan chooses wiser speech. When Rowan chooses wiser speech, relationships stabilize. When relationships stabilize, safety grows. When safety grows, ego clings less. A new loop. This is karma transformed, not by magic, by awareness. Now the story deepens because Rowan starts noticing that losing yourself is not a one-time event. It is a daily training. You lose the false self a little each day. You lose it when you admit you were wrong without collapsing. You lose it when you apologize without defending. You lose it when you let someone be disappointed in you and you survive. You lose it when you stop performing and you tell the truth. You lose it when you choose rest instead of proving you are unstoppable. You lose it when you stop buying things to fill feelings. You lose it when you stop chasing attention and start building presence. Each time you do this, the ego shrinks a little. And as ego shrinks, suffering shrinks. Because suffering is often the friction between ego demands and reality. Now Rowan begins experimenting with a new way of living. Rowan notices an urge to impress. Rowan breathes and lets it pass. Rowan notices an urge to control a conversation. Rowan breathes and listens instead. Rowan notices an urge to prove someone wrong online. Rowan breathes and logs off. Rowan notices an urge to blame the past. Rowan breathes and takes one step in the present. These are small moves, but small moves repeated become a new destiny. Rowan starts feeling something that is hard to describe until you taste it. A clean mind. A clean mind is not a mind without problems. It is a mind that is not constantly lying to itself. It is a mind that is not constantly performing. It is a mind that is not constantly chasing relief through craving and conflict. A clean mind feels quiet in a way that is not empty. It feels spacious. It feels honest. It feels steady. And from that steadiness, Rowan starts acting with more compassion, not because Rowan is trying to look spiritual, because compassion becomes natural when ego is not constantly screaming. Now I want to tell you a second story inside this story, because losing yourself is not only about emotions, it is also about identity roles, the ones you inherited. Imagine Rowan grew up with a role, maybe the responsible one, maybe the smart one, maybe the tough one, maybe the peacemaker, maybe the invisible one, maybe the one who never needs help. That role was not chosen freely. It was often a survival strategy. It helped Rowan get love, avoid conflict, or feel safe. But survival roles can become cages. If you are always the responsible one, you never get to rest. If you are always the smart one, you never get to be confused. If you are always the tough one, you never get to be tender. If you are always the peacemaker, you never get to be honest about anger. If you are always invisible, you never get to be seen. So part of losing yourself is losing the role that kept you safe but keeps you small. Rowan begins noticing how the role operates. When someone asks for help, Rowan says yes immediately, even when tired. When someone criticizes, Rowan over-explains. When someone is upset, Rowan tries to fix it. When Rowan has needs, Rowan hides them. All of this is ego, but not the loud, proud ego. This is the anxious ego, the ego that tries to earn safety. The subtle art here is to see that this anxious ego is still self-centered, not in a selfish way, but in a fear-driven way. It is always calculating how to avoid rejection. So Rowan practices a new kind of courage. Rowan says no sometimes. Rowan allows someone to be disappointed. Rowan asks for help. Rowan speaks needs clearly. Each time Rowan does this, it feels like losing identity. Who am I if I am not the one who always gives? But then a deeper identity begins to appear. Are a human being. A human being who can give and also receive. A human being who can be kind and also have boundaries. A human being who can love and also be honest. This is not losing yourself into emptiness. This is losing the false self so the real self can breathe. Now let us connect this to wisdom, because losing yourself without wisdom can become confusion. Wisdom here means knowing what you are losing. You are losing clinging. You are losing the addiction to being right. You are losing the addiction to being admired. You are losing the belief that you must control everything. You are losing the belief that you are your thoughts. You are losing the belief that your worth is your success. You are not losing your values. You are not losing your capacity to love. You are not losing your discernment. You are not losing your responsibility. In fact, you gain those qualities in a cleaner form, because when you act from ego, even good actions are mixed with hunger. When you act from clarity, good actions become pure. This is why spiritual traditions talk about purification, not as moral vanity, but as reducing the mixture of self-centered craving in every action. Now Rowan experiences a moment that makes all of this undeniable. Rowan is in a conflict with someone close. In the past, Rowan would fight to win. Rowan would prove points. Rowan would bring receipts. Rowan would aim for victory. But now Rowan tries a different approach. Rowan listens. Rowan admits what is true. Rowan apologizes for harm. Rowan states boundaries without cruelty. Rowan does not try to dominate the other person. At first, the other person is shocked. The other person expected battle. Then the tone changes. The room becomes softer, not perfect, but less toxic. The conflict becomes workable instead of destructive. Rowan feels something inside that is more satisfying than winning. Rowan feels peace. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Peace is the absence of ego war. This is a major turning point, because many people are addicted to ego war. It feels like strength. It feels like control, but it is actually suffering. It keeps the nervous system trapped in fight mode. So losing yourself is also the art of leaving ego war. Now let us talk about destiny again, because losing yourself is not only about feeling better today, it changes the direction of your life. If you keep clinging, your destiny becomes a repeated loop of the same suffering, the same conflicts, the same overthinking, the same anxiety, the same chase, the same emptiness after achievement. But if you loosen clinging, your destiny shifts. You make different choices. You choose different relationships. You speak differently. You spend differently. You rest differently. You treat others differently. You become someone different. And that someone is not a mask. It is a truer version of you. Now I want to bring in the idea of compassion more strongly, because compassion is the fruit of losing yourself. When the false self shrinks, you stop taking everything personally. You stop reading every delay as rejection. You stop reading every criticism as a verdict. You stop reading every disagreement as a threat. This makes you less reactive. Less reactive means you cause less harm. Causing less harm is compassion in action. Then something else happens. You begin seeing other people's suffering more clearly, because your mind is not so full of your own performance. You notice the quiet sadness in a friend. You notice the stress in a parent. You notice the insecurity in the person who boasts. You notice the fear in the person who attacks. You realize most harm is driven by pain. This does not excuse harm, but it helps you respond skillfully. Skillful response is wisdom. Wisdom plus compassion is awakening. Now let us go deeper into the spiritual heart of losing yourself. The part that people often fear. They fear that if they lose ego, they will lose ambition. They fear that if they lose ego, they will become passive. They fear that if they lose ego, they will not protect themselves. But look carefully. Ego ambition is often anxious ambition. It is ambition fueled by proving. It never rests. It creates burnout. It creates comparison. It creates jealousy. It creates emptiness after success. But when ego shrinks, a different kind of ambition can appear. Purpose. Purpose is quieter. Purpose does not need applause. Purpose does not collapse when others disagree. Purpose can rest and still continue. Purpose is aligned with values. So losing ego does not remove drive. It cleans drive. It turns frantic proving into steady purpose. That is a massive upgrade. Now Rowan begins living with purpose. Rowan chooses work and study based more on meaning and less on status. Rowan chooses friends based more on mutual care and less on image. Rowan chooses habits based more on health and less on escape. Rowan begins meditating regularly, not to look spiritual, but to keep the mind clean. Rowan begins practicing gratitude because gratitude reduces craving. Rowan begins practicing generosity because generosity loosens attachment. Rowan begins practicing patience because patience is the ability to live without forcing. All of this is losing yourself in daily life. Now let us talk about the moment when losing yourself feels the hardest. It feels hardest when someone misunderstands you because ego wants to control how you are seen. If someone thinks you are weak, ego screams. If someone thinks you are wrong, ego screams. If someone thinks you are boring, ego screams. So losing yourself includes letting go of image control. This is not easy, but it is freeing because image control is endless work. You can never fully control what others think, so trying to control it is suffering. When you stop trying, your energy returns. You can use that energy for learning, service, creativity, or simply living. Now I want to offer you a third story because many people discover losing yourself through grief. A person loses someone or something. A relationship ends. A dream ends. A phase ends. And in the grief, the ego breaks because the ego cannot negotiate with impermanence. You cannot argue a season into staying. You cannot prove your way out of loss. So grief becomes a teacher. If you let it, the lesson is not that nothing matters. The lesson is that clinging creates extra pain. When you accept impermanence, love becomes more honest. You appreciate more. You forgive more. You waste less time. You stop postponing kindness. You become more present. Presence is the greatest gift. So losing yourself is also the art of becoming present, because the false self lives in past threatened future fear. The real self lives in now. Now is where breath happens. Now is where compassion happens. Now is where choices happen. Now is where karma is planted. Now is where destiny changes. So the subtle art is to return to now again and again, not perfectly, but consistently. Now I want to bring everything together and speak to you directly, because the purpose of this channel is not only to tell stories, it is to help you see your own life with more wisdom. If you feel like you are losing yourself right now, maybe you are going through a season where identity is cracking. Do not panic. Cracking is not always destruction. Sometimes cracking is opening. A seed cracks before it grows. A shell cracks before a bird flies. A rigid identity cracks before a freer life appears. The question is what you do in the crack. If you fill the crack with distractions, you might miss the lesson. If you fill the crack with blame, you might harden. If you fill the crack with numbness, you might stagnate. But if you sit in the crack with awareness, something changes. You start seeing what is real. You start seeing what matters. You start seeing what is worth holding, then what is worth releasing. You start seeing the difference between love and attachment. You start seeing the difference between confidence and ego. You start seeing the difference between ambition and anxiety. That seeing is awakening. And awakening is not a dramatic spiritual event. It is the daily practice of seeing clearly and choosing compassion. So, here is the heart of the message. Losing yourself does not mean becoming nobody. It means becoming less trapped by craving, less trapped by fear, less trapped by image, less trapped by needing to win, less trapped by needing to be right, less trapped by needing to be special. As those traps loosen, you become more capable of love, more capable of truth, more capable of steadiness, more capable of service, more capable of joy that does not depend on applause. That is real freedom. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I want you to share in the comments what part of your identity feels most heavy right now, the part you are tired of performing, and what it would feel like to loosen it gently without becoming careless. And if you want more videos like this that connect awakening, wisdom, karma, compassion, practice, and destiny, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment to support this community. I will see you in the next one.